Right, welcome to our first live event of 2023, which I sincerely hope will not be our last. We began a number of years ago this curious habit of having what we call a Café Chimique. Now, the idea of the Café Chimique started around the concept that if you were sitting comfortably with a nice drink in your hand, you would be more than ready to engage in an intellectual chit-chat. And so the first of these took place actually at the Saint-Contenaire, in the small room adjacent to the Motor Museum. And it was on the subject of climate change. And the two participants were my former, sadly deceased colleague, István Marko, Professor of Organic Chemistry at UCL, and the then Vice Chairman of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, Jean-Pascal Van Ypersele. And they had a debate on climate change, which, according to the straw poll at the entry, was in favour of climate change, believed all the climate change story, and by the time they went out at the end, they didn't believe it anymore. So I think there's little doubt who had the upper hand on that one, and it doesn't surprise our first lecturer this evening, our first presenter, Samuel Furfari, who is a colleague of István's in the good cause of trying to bring people's attention to the fact that some of the information available on climate change is not all it seems to be. However, he's an emeritus professor in the Université Libre de Bruxelles, and he was a professor of energy geopolitics. So that already tells you what we're going to be into geopolitics before we can know where we are. Our other speaker this evening, thank you again for coming, Paul, is Paul Kompfner, who's an advisor on ITS and smart mobility, and has worked for a long time in the area of transport. We decided to more specifically make this evening's discussion, Café Chimique, on sustainable urban transport, because once you start going outside of big cities, there are a lot more questions, and some of the questions are more specific to smaller communities than to big communities. So we're going to talk about, and of course it's very clear that since human society started having the tendency to live in cities, we have, and since we started to have means of transport, we have been discussing how to organise transport in cities for a long time. I would remind you that C.E.P. Joad in the Brains Trust on the BBC just after World War II made an interesting comment. He was asked, what advice would you give to a young man going out into the world? C.P. Joad coughed discreetly and said, don't wait for a bus or a woman, there'll be another round the corner in a minute. In those days, the buses were perhaps more frequent in London than they are today. But with the increasing plans to impose charges on people going into London who have cars over a certain age, the same measures being taken in London and in Brussels and elsewhere to restrict access to certain streets. Bobby got a parking ticket in London quite recently by driving down a perfectly innocent street which he'd always used in the past as a shortcut to get to somewhere, and that was £25. You have to be careful. People want to, and of course this creates what is well known, just so that those of you who don't know the English expression, this creates a well-known phenomenon which is known as NIMBYism. Not in my, the usual expletives deleted, backyard. Yes, there's usually NI. There can be two B's, but never mind. Yes.
You know Nimpo?
Nimpo,
not in my pocket.
Well, that's another variant of the same. Anyway, what we're going to do is begin by asking each of our two speakers to give you a very short presentation on what they see as the problems and the solutions to sustainable urban transport. And then I will open the floor to questions, and you are welcome to ask them whatever you like, and we hope that we will have an interesting debate. There will be snibbles and soft and wine and beer available throughout the evening. Help yourselves, or maybe you're going to help them. Is somebody going to do this? Oh, Tim, totally got two. Tim and Jonathan will serve you at the bar. So when you feel that you want to replenish your glass, Slangevar, you know where to go. Right, so I didn't draw straws. Which of you wishes to go first?
He does.
You go first.
As you want.
There you are. That's a very generous gesture. Thank you very much, Paul. Samuel, it's over to you. Your countdown starts now.
Okay, thank you. And good evening. Thank you for being here. You can wait a few seconds because, okay, no, the time is starting now. Mobility is a human necessity. We cannot live without moving. It's part of us. Marco Polo went to China by on the road, and he came back by boat. This is already a sign that we need different type of transport according to the distance, according to what they have to bring back. They have to bring back a lot of things in Italy, so it took the boat. So it's a human necessity. Next one. This is Mr. Cesare Marchetti, a colleague from the European Commission, a physicist, and he left the Commission and went to work in a research center in Vienna, and he discovered that the size of the city depends on the capacity of traveling for 50 minutes. He studied the city size of Greek, Roman cities, and he discovered that the more the people were able to travel by car or whatever, then the size of the city was increasing to a limit that at one moment the city had to grow up like in New York. So that means that we need to move, but we have to accept that we doesn't want to move to 2 hours travel every day. It's not possible. So there is science behind that. It's not just a wish. There is science that we need to move, and it should not be too far away from where we live. Next one. And it's why, despite all the difficulties that we have with oil supply, oil product, diesel, gasoline, kerosene, still represent 92% of the energy that we use in transportation. In the other sectors, you see it's different. We have a good mix for heating, electricity, good mix. That's not for transportation. Despite that we have worked for many years to try to find solutions, like the electrical car, hydrogen car. So it's not new that we want to find solution. Please forget climate change about mobility. It's a previous problem, very old problem. To say that we have to solve it because it's climate change, I don't believe that it's true. We want to solve it since so many years. On the right, this is electrical car, which win the exhibition 1,900 in Paris. It's a Porsche. Price of innovation, 123 years ago. This is why I will not remain on this, but this is why geopolitics of oil is ongoing. Venezuela is a pariah, but no, we do not import oil from Russia. We need oil from the pariah of Venezuela. And in the middle of the COP in Sharm el-Sheikh, they were discussing about oil because we need mobility. Next one. Can we afford to pass to electricity mobility? if you never drive an electrical car, you should, because you will see that it's wonderful. But there are a lot of inconvenients. The larger problem is that we will need electricity, a lot of electricity. I published this paper with the data. In Belgium, we will need 23% more electricity. And you know that they are closing the power plant. So it's total contradiction. In Italy, if they want to pass to mobility, they need to increase it by 40%. Who is going to pay that? We consumer. We consumer who will pay for people who are having an electrical car. Because it will be extremely expensive. Because you need to replace the cables in the cities. It's nice to have electrical cars, if you want. But if everybody has to have an electrical car, you need to open all the streets in Brussels or London and put new cables. And copper is very expensive. And there is no new geopolitics about coppers. We don't know where the copper will come if this is becoming true. So it's a huge problem. Next one. I think that electrical cars are fantastic. Look at the bike, and it's fantastic, electrical bike. But for heavy duty, that's becoming a problem. I will not enter into the details. Next one. Yeah. No, remain here. If you want to transform a Ducato, a Fiat truck to pass to electricity, it has to carry more weight as a battery than it can carry itself. So this is not a solution, because the weight is the problem. So we need to admit that in cities, small cars will be efficient and nice, but for utilities it will not be possible. Too expensive. Next one. Furthermore, all this will create a new dependency, strong dependency from China. We are already importing batteries, electrical vehicle. 50% of electrical vehicles in Europe are coming from China. Photovoltaic panels, wind turbine, electrolyzer to produce hydrogen, everything will come from China. And this is very dangerous. So if we think mobility, we have to reflect also not to fall like we have done for many years with the Arab countries, depending too much on them. Next one. There is a solution which I've proposed when I was working in the European Commission. It's the use of natural gas. Natural gas is clean. You know that in the restaurant they are cooking with natural gas. All restaurants in Europe are cooking with natural gas because it's clean. We should replace all buses, trucks, and maybe cars in cities with methane. And then you remove NOx, SOx, dust, noise. So the solutions are there. But strange enough, in 2016, the Commission said, stop that. Everything should be electrical. Those pictures are realities. They are existing. In Iran, huge majority of cars are using methane because Iran has a geopolitical problem. I cannot enter into the details now, but I think that it's important to remind us that we have clean solution immediately without science fiction. Next one. What is the science fiction? Hydrogen. Hydrogen is science fiction. You see the picture here: Amsterdam, Barcelona, Hamburg, London, Luxembourg, Madrid, Porto, Stockholm, Stuttgart, Madrid. All pictures of 20 years ago. I was the manager of those programs. Science fiction. Next one.
You have 2 minutes.
Yes, I'm finishing. 5 days ago, we celebrate 100-year anniversary of the announcement by John Haldane in Cambridge that we should produce hydrogen with windmill. 100 years and 5 days, and still looking for solution in hydrogen. Next one. Again, the same guy, Cesare Marchetti. He was the man who have invented the policy of hydrogen in the European Commission. I know that because I was working with him, and where I published a book, The Hydrogen Illusion. My wife has copies if you are interested, with all the details how to drive electrical hydrogen cars in 1979. It's existing, but it's not working. It's not enough economic. There is no way to go out of this. I think it's the last one. No. So what should we do? I think that there are solutions, and the solutions are smart everything. Smart mobility, smart marking, smart homes, smart security. I think that with this type of thing that show me that I should stop, it's possible to travel in a clear, clean and better way. That means that we have not to be afraid of the mobility. We have to be afraid of to be afraid. Solutions are existing. Next one, I think it's the last one. Yes, this is the last one.
I like this. That was the anti-penultimate slide.
I attend the Smart City conference in Yunchuan in China 2 years. And this is the slide that they presented, the mayor of Yunchuan. No car purchasing limitation and no traffic restriction based on car number. This is the vision of Chinese cities. No restriction, because everything will depend on smart. And then we can control the city. Because it's possible to have clean cities today, because we have different type of fuel, and we need to put intelligence in the mobility. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You just ran over by 30 seconds, but that's all right. We'll allow that. Paul, it's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Samuel, because I think my few words, fit extremely well as a follow-on from what you said. Because I've spent now almost 30 years working in smart mobility. And you can see I believe in it. And it's still not here, is it? So I still think we have a crisis for transport in the transport sector as a whole due to carbon emissions coming from this. It's roughly a quarter of Europe's total emissions are coming from transport. So I'm afraid I do believe enough in climate change being caused by CO2 emissions and global warming coming from that. And the EU, as far as I understand from last year, has set itself an overall target of reducing total emissions by 55% by the year 2030. So I ask all of us, how on earth do you translate that 55% cut into something that is an operational target for real solutions and real policies and actions? Because this is something that is set in the COP process. These are national governments negotiating, and national governments or the European government has said 55% we have to cut it, but they don't say how to do it. And in particular, they don't say how to allocate 55% down to each of the different sectors. And you can't stop at the sector, but you need to allocate a share of this to people that own transport, like cities, like public transport, railways, users, and all the suppliers and other actors in this ecosystem. And I've never seen a way that this is done that operationalizes such an enormous challenge. And we're now less than 8 years away from that target. So how in the real world do we achieve such cuts? And where is the plan for that? Okay, next one. I think that we need to do something that I have never seen really done anywhere at any kind of scale. I think that the solution is not with governments, it is not with industry, it is somehow that all of the interests in transport who are generating demand for transport, bring them around one table in a local mobility partnership. When I say local, I am thinking first of all at city level, so I think you're right there, Bob, but also there needs to be a kind of regional level for this, and then national and supranational. But I did a little experiment at an ITS Congress in Copenhagen. I had a sort of mock partnership around a table in a special session in the Congress, and we were in the middle around a round table, and the audience were all around us, so we were doing a kind of theatre in the round, trying to game a little bit how each of those actors could contribute to reducing their transport emissions. So take the example of, I don't know, we had IKEA at the table, a guy from IKEA Denmark. And basically IKEA had introduced or opened their first city centre store. And you know the model for IKEA. It's an enormous hangar out on a ring road somewhere that everybody has to go to by expressway or ring road or whatever it is. And they have a city centre, IKEA. Well, the experience of shopping IKEA in the city one is going to be very different. You don't walk in and expect to fill up a whole trolley. No, you go there on foot, you go there on your bike, and somehow you manage to sample their products and get them delivered to you. And actually, I think it's pretty self-evident that it should be more efficient, or it should be able to be made more efficient to have people making an order and then having one delivery truck delivering 30 to 40 or 50 deliveries rather than having 50 cars going to their car park. So I'll come back to this, but next one. So starting from that, I think they could, as a community, come up with a solution. Mobility as a service, I think, is close to that. It's a new, trendy term that's been used for a few years now. This is from the first company in the business. It's it combines all urban transport services in one step, and users can journey where and when they want with all these modes: public transport, shared cars, taxis, whatever, all with a single subscription. So you pay for it like you pay for your internet or your telephone. Next. Mass Global, I think, has less than 5% of the market in Helsinki, which is their hometown. So it is not a screaming economic, commercial success at the moment. What I think it needs, this is just to show how it works. So you see in the middle, there's a kind of marketplace. It's a digital marketplace that the brokers, the demand coming from individuals or employees or companies or any other kind of organization, and says, okay, you want a trip or you want a transport service, I will match you with the fulfillment down here. These are the people that run things with wheels. And Uber is a very good example of mobility as a service. It is this platform in the middle between customers and vehicles driven by their drivers. But it's a single company. Imagine doing that now for the entire of transport and mobility. Next. Because for me, that is what it can be a solution, because I think you're right. What we need to work on is not the fuel and the infrastructure, it's how transport and mobility are organized, what creates the demand for movement, and we need actually more movement. There's a lot of frustrated movement that doesn't take place because either the roads are too congested, or people don't have the vehicle, or if they can't drive, they don't have the transport. So my suggestion is, and this is what I'd like to talk about with you in the cafe part, that I think there's something to be created that I call a universal mobility service. In my view, 95% of all transport movements would be covered and included by that service. And the service would be supplied by a wide range of transport providers, also allowing for people to use their own car within the scheme. But it should cover the whole territory, urban, but also the suburban and the interurban, but also in this middle area where there's an awful lot of traffic, in the periphery around the city centre, which has much less public transport, for example, and therefore people are much more likely to need or will to want to use their car. It should cover absolutely the whole population, all the sectors that generate a need for movement or that move something themselves, passengers, goods, deliveries, logistics. The WIM service, the mass service, is only for passengers. They hadn't realized that maybe you could even actually combine different journey purposes, different types, and all means of transport should all be included in this. So that, and I actually think it's realistic. I think it would be self-funding. I think it can actually make a profit for people. So it's not just something that I'm expecting governments to provide or business. And I think that's my last word.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Back Yep. Right. Well, so we've now got a start. You now have had two very interesting presentations. Let's see where the questions come from. Yes, Boo.
I've just finished to read a book by a French journalist, which is Electrical Cars, Are They Crazy?, where he lists all the problems that will come out of that. Problem to have the electricity, the problem to have enough charging stations, the problem to find parking place with charging stations, but also, as was mentioned by the first speaker, the problem that much of the car production and batteries will come from China, which will be a big imbalance in our trade. And finally, also a tax problem, because 50% of the price of petrol, etc., goes into the state coffers. And the question is, for France, he mentioned 40 billion euros in tax income, and he wonders from where that will come. Will that be put on the electricity, or will it be put on other things? So he also underlines at the end that we should look into other things like natural gas, but also hydrogen. Have you heard about this book? Or
who is the author? Which book is this?
Les voitures électriques, ils sont devenus fous. The author's name I don't remember.
It's Gérondeau? Christian Gérondeau?
It might be, yes.
Because I read the book of Christian Gérondeau recently, and he's saying that the problem of course, electrical cars are very nice for cities, not for outside cities. There is a huge inconvenience. But for cities it's nice because you avoid local pollution, no noise. So,
which presents a traffic hazard for pedestrians.
Yeah. Yes, of course. Yeah. Nothing is perfect.
No.
But the problem is that why on earth it should be compulsory That's the problem. Why it should be compulsory? I think that if it is something that is so nice, the market people will buy it. Why do we oblige people to buy electrical cars? With all the inconvenience you mentioned. Yes, the list of inconveniences is very long. There are advantages, but a lot of inconvenience. It's like that in our life, huh?
Well, everything
is like that.
The obvious.
And what do we do? Every minute, every second, in our brain, we make choice. You are maybe switching off not to listen to me. That's your choice. But it's the same. It's the same with cars. Why should we be obliged, like in the Soviet time, that everybody should do the same thing? So this is a big mistake, with all the inconvenience that we will have on the geopolitics. That's a huge problem.
Paul?
I think I'm quite agnostic about what form of what the source of energy. At the moment, electric vehicles seem attractive to the extent that they may help us to reduce these, achieve a 55% cut rather quickly. The problem with using gas is that gas is still producing CO2. It's clean to use, but it's still producing CO2.
You reply.
I think, for example, going back to my kind of dream of the universal mobility service, it would be a way to introduce an electrification of the fleet, or a decarbonization of the fleet, in a way that does not require individuals to buy a relatively expensive electric car themselves, that they only use occasionally. And it's much more about how you manage the arrangements rather than managing the technology. It's that, in fact, at the moment, I think I'm looking to try and reverse entropy here, because I think at the moment what happens...
It's going to be an uphill struggle in chemical terms.
What happens in the sense of transport and mobility today is people do not take account of, people are free atoms, they don't take account of other things when they decide or choose to travel in a certain way. But what they don't know, my company ERTICO was in the Blue Tower on Avenue Louise. It's 24 floors. And I came up with the idea, why don't we at least have a meeting between the more than 24 different tenants in that building. It had 5 stories of underground car park. Why didn't we have a meeting and discuss where people are coming from, and the suppliers that come, the customers that come, and all these people and things that come and go to this one building, 326 Avenue Louise, causing quite a lot of traffic. But the people next door on the same floor had never talked to each other. And so each little company, we had like 40, 45 people. Of course, that was not a critical mass for organizing ride sharing or some way to reduce the intensity of transport to achieve the same mobility. And this kind of discussion does not take place. That's why I'm suggesting that we need a new way to bring transport users together. And the result of that would be more ride sharing, shared deliveries, shared use of deliveries coming to the building. And you could probably reduce the transport movements by easily 20 to 30%, I suspect. I don't know a scientific basis for that, but I'm sure it would be reduced. And therefore, you are lessening the entropy there.
I agree with Paul that electrical car can reduce the CO2 emissions if you are in Norway. In Norway, 97% of the electricity is hydro, so it's renewable. It's maybe good, maybe in France, where 75% of the electricity is nuclear, so no CO2. But in the rest of Europe, that's not true, that electrical car reduce the CO2. Because electricity is coming from power plant, burning lignite in Germany, coal in Poland, gas in Italy, gas in Spain, and so on. So what is the advantage? Forget electrical car for CO2. If you want to address CO2, forget electrical car, please, because this is not a solution. Except if you are in Norway, of course.
One more point from the book. It says that the average age of cars in France is 10 years. And if you replace all the old cars with modern cars, you will cut the pollution by half. So already there we are already at the figure by using top modern
yes, new cars are polluting much less.
Yeah.
Furthermore, there is a huge problem that people do not mention with electrical car. There is no second-hand market. After 10 years, your electrical car value is zero because you need to replace the battery. It's far too expensive. And you cannot send the electrical car in Africa like we do with the diesel.
With the Volkswagens, right?
Because they have no electricity in Africa. So you buy a car, and after 10 years, value is zero. And you know, a lot of people in Europe cannot afford to buy a car.
No, well,
they buy second-hand car.
Of course. Yeah.
And we are destroying that.
Yeah.
So it's an ethical problem also.
The other little thing that one should remember. We have a colleague who's based in.
You are very clever.
Who's based in Finland, and he usually drives here in his car. And he said if he was to have an electric car, it would take him 4 days, because he would have to stop so often to charge his car. So for any lengthy distances at all at the moment, electric cars are a no-no in terms of distance. You don't agree? No, let's have your point of view.
I drive an electric car and I've done the road trips, no problem at all.
Yeah.
The facilities are there, the charging stations are there, no problem at all.
But you still have
you have no problem with car. No problem. The other have problem, not you.
But for the moment, there are not so many electrical cars in comparison of the whole possible park. So you have plenty access to all the facilities. So now if you move everybody to electrical car, I don't know, if you want to go south of France in July,
it's not possible.
It's nearly impossible. Or we need to find a new way to change battery in the cars.
Yeah.
But you know, it's an ethical problem also, because it's nice that you have an electrical car. I congratulate you, because it's a real pleasure. But the people that do not have electrical car have to pay more for the electricity, because we will need to reshuffle completely the network. Network should be replaced. And who is going to pay that? The electricity consumer, not the government. So a niche is fantastic. I repeat, it's good to have some electrical car, but not for everybody. This is just impossible.
Next
I
question.
don't know if I'm allowed to speak, but
Maybe I do have a question just
Sure.
to that. So I think
Next, Jonathan.
yeah, is it okay?
No, after you. After you. Go ahead.
Maybe
Go
it's
ahead.
okay.
You go first.
One thing intrigued me because the speech was very good. Yeah, also Paul's speech was very good, full of good facts. But one thing that intrigues me: the assumption that we can see a future, a realistic future, where there can be as many cars as we have today. Isn't a realistic future that there should only be 20%, even less, of the cars that we have today, and that maybe today's world is a world of absolute excess, total exaggeration, and that we have to find some way of sharing all these electrical vehicles that for most of us spend 5% on the road, 5% of active life, and the rest of the time it's sitting in a car park, it's sitting in a garage, It's sitting at people's convenience. And then if you do those numbers, then suddenly a lot of these challenges go away. You don't need so much electricity because you have much less cars. You don't need to replace that much copper. You just have to focus on specific points. You can make solar panels on your house. So it's not just for the cities. It's very convenient for outside the cities where people live in houses. They just put their cheap solar panels. They are energy independent. And you may have little networks in villages where the neighbors sell electricity to one another when they need it. You could even have your electrical car giving the power back during the times that the lights have to go on in the neighborhood. So you charge them during the day. They are connected in a little village. You sell electricity to one another, and all these electrical cars light up the village during the night. Isn't that the proper alternative? Moving away from the exaggeration that we have had now.
A car which is not, which is in the garage, do not use energy. It's only when it moves that it uses energy. So the assumption that we are creating problem because we have a car in the garage and we don't use it is wrong. It's only when you use it that you have a problem. A car in your house, which if you don't use it, is not a problem. First thing. Second thing, what you mentioned is it's well known that we need to use the batteries of the car to generate electricity and so on. This is just impossible. Physically impossible. So nice. But once you deal with the fact of the electricity, you forget about that. It will not exist. It's not possible. Physically, it's not possible. Like the fact that we are going to have all photovoltaic or wind. This is a joke. It's just impossible. Nature do not allow to do that. You know what is the percentage of time that a solar panel is producing in Europe? 11% of the time. 11%. The average from the north to the south. That means that you put a solar panel, you have energy during 11% of the time. And you want to use your car to send electricity to the network? No, we are just misled in this. We are misled by things which are just science fiction. And windmill, it's a little bit better. Windmill is 23%. That means that 3/4 of the time a windmill is useless. And it depends of the wind, it do not depend of the politician.
Well, we could use the politicians to generate more wind, because they generate enough more wind as it is.
Yes.
How about the question about the one-for-one replacement? Let's keep it simple. Like, do you think that's realistic? Is really my question.
Yeah.
The assumption of the one-for-one replacement, is that realistic? Can we continue to live like this?
No.
Yes.
You think?
Yes, I believe so. And we will continue to live like this because the rest of the world will do much more than we are doing. You believe that in China? I show you the slide. The mayor of Yinchuan. We will not restrict the number of cars in our city. Smart city, the most advanced smart city in China. So their vision is different. They have a vision of explosion of the economy. We have a vision to restrain the economy. So this is a challenge for us, or our children, let's say.
Jonathan.
I guess the first is about the mass MAS system. Talk about you can give the government solution, but a business solution. I wonder what thought processes were behind that. Why businesses would provide better service.
No, I said it is neither exclusively a government's responsibility nor of business alone to come up with what this new kind of solution. It absolutely requires all the actors around the table, and I think what would push it on is it's not physics or chemistry, but it would be actually giving CO2 a monetary value. For example, I go to my local Deleuze. I like green asparagus. I like it all year round. There's a short season in Belgium, a few weeks really, maybe just over a month. The rest of the year you can get it the same price, coming from Peru, which I presume is air freighted because it's a very fresh sort of, doesn't keep, and yet it's the same price. And there's no information provided by the supermarket as to the carbon cost of all their product. And there's no information on CO2 cost for any product or service that you buy pretty well anywhere. And this would be a relatively simple thing to do. But actually, there have been, in the past, there have been some trials of an actual local currency in which, for example, a kilogram of CO2 was worth €1 or €5 or something. So, this is the kind of thing that a government could bring in, but that would have a profound effect throughout the economy. And I think, there's an awful lot of greenwashing going on, but I mean, I worked with, as a partner in some proposals with Colruyt, which I think is a very enlightened company in Europe and certainly in Belgium. At the time when I was working with them, they claimed to have the largest fleet of electric bikes in Europe. It was because they gave an electric bike to their employees that lived more than 7 kilometers from the workplace. And if it was less than that, they just got a regular bike. They also had something they called, I think it was an office bus or a work bus. Their headquarters is in Halle, south of Brussels, and they got a lot of people who live in Ghent. And they come along this wonderful traffic-free, congestion-free motorway called the E40. And they could arrive in 40 minutes or in 3 hours. They provided a bus with like 16 workstations in it, and coffee and croissant and newspapers and Wi-Fi. And people would get on the bus at 7:30, and they would start working. So the time they were in the bus to work and back from work was work time for them. So their time in the office was less, but they were still being productive for the company. And yet that's the only company I've heard of doing that, and I don't even know if it's still working. That is a kind of idea that will come out of that partnership, that table, and I have no idea what will come out, but what I know is that until that process happens, we will not sort out a way of really getting anywhere near 50% reduction in transport emissions in a city like Brussels or any city you like. Maybe Vienna will do it, but I mean, I said we had an ITS Congress in Copenhagen in 2018. At that point, we worked with some people from the city. Carbon-free by 2025, was it? I think Copenhagen was going to be the first carbon-free, carbon-neutral, or carbon-free, carbon-neutral city in Europe. Quietly last year, they gave it up. They're not good. They knew they were not going to get near it.
So you think the government needs more sticks to?
No, I don't think it's the government sticks that are needed. I think there are policies, there are taxes, there are the opposite of taxes, there are incentives that need to come out. All of that would come out of that round table that you saw there. And I would love to help set up a pilot scheme in a city that would like to be a Corbeil, a guinea pig to try it.
You want to come back on this? I've got
transport and CO2. First of all, before that, if you want to have a proxy of the CO2 that you produce, instead of reading a label, just look at the price that you pay. 81% of the energy used in the world is fossil fuel, producing CO2. The price of this, 81% of the energy to produce this is CO2. And the price of this is different because the CO2 is less emitted here. So you don't need to have a label to tell you what is the price, the CO2 impact. Just the cost is the best proxy. This is just to say that I should stop to speak.
I think it wasn't me. I can promise you, mine's still in my pocket.
But no, on CO2 and transport. For time being in Europe, there is a mechanism which is called ETS. That means that you need to buy and trade CO2.
Oh yeah, we troc CO2 around in exchange.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
More or less, the price of this for many years was around 30 euro per ton of CO2. Mm-hmm. And now recently it has increased. It is nearly 80. So 1 ton of CO2 is, let's say, 80. When the war will finish, it might go back to 60 or whatever. Do you know how much we pay as CO2 with excise and VAT? Because you know that we pay nearly 60% of the price of the fuel for the government. Huh? Mm-hmm. We pay nearly 400 euro the ton of CO2. If you transform the CO2 emitted and you calculate the excise that you pay for that, it's 6 times the price of the ton of CO2. What does it mean? You can increase the price of the CO2. People will continue to use their car because we pay already 6 times the price of the CO2.
Yes, but none of the side effects of the global warming are built into the ETS itself. So, if there's flooding in Pakistan...
Yes, but this is another story. This is another story. We are talking, what should we do in Europe to reduce the CO2 emission, the 55% you mentioned?
Yes.
So, if you want to tax diesel and gasoline or even kerosene, you need to multiply by 6 to reach what we pay already too much. So this proves the inelasticity of the demand. Despite the fact that we pay 65% in taxes, we continue to use it. When the price have jumped to more than 2 euro a few months ago, did we stop to use our transportation? No, it's a need. First slide. We need to move. It's not a choice. We can choose to go on holiday, but this is marginal compared to the move that we have to do every day. This is our life. We need to move. And if we don't move, others have to move. Have you noticed how much Amazon is developing? We doesn't go shopping, but Amazon is coming to you. How? With mobility. So we cannot escape mobility. It's a human need. We need to integrate that. We need to breathe, we need to drink, we need to move. It's not a choice.
Boo again. Sorry, I was about to come in with another.
First, the thing I had never heard about as a problem with electrical cars. A few weeks ago, they had a lot of snow in Liège area. And one of the problems was that electrical cars got stuck and they can't tow electrical cars. So they had to have trucks coming there and moving them. And I also heard from a friend that a friend of his had bought a brand new Jaguar 100% electrical, and he wanted to go down to the Belgian coast. It was a traffic accident, and after 2 hours and a half the battery was flat and he was stuck on the way. And then he came back to Brussels after having charged, and then he wanted to go to Brittany and he had problems to charge the car. And once he was back, he wanted to sell his brand new car, and he accepted to lose 15,000 euros just to get rid of it because it had only created problems.
But this gentleman have no problem.
No, actually, it's quite unbelievable, these stories, yeah? It's hard to believe that. Maybe
Right.
I mean, there are, to your point, can be charged. There are charge points everywhere. Every Shell station, every Esso station, every DAT station, even.
Because you have not a lot of car.
Yeah, but no. But
You imagine.
Bo mentions today. Yeah, this poor gentleman has to lose his car because he doesn't maybe know how to use it. I don't know. How can you run out of electricity on E40? It's very hard when you have passed so many stations, charging stations. So, and also in the cold, when we think about the example given here in Norway is not known to be a hot country. They have lots of snow. It's very cold. A lot of electric cars are being sold in Canada. Very cold country. There is nothing special about cold and electrical cars.
Thank you.
Your battery is not suddenly going to run out of power in the cold. It's just not going to happen because the battery is kept warm by the car. There is a sophisticated computer system in there so that it doesn't lose the power. In terms of range, on the screen it says how many kilometers you still have. It will warn you. So unless you do the same thing that nobody does with a internal combustion engine car, which is run the car empty, unless you do that, I mean another car will run empty as well and stop. And you towing, you mentioned cannot tow. Of course it can tow. I have a tow bar on my car. Why would I have a tow bar on my car if I can't tow? Of course it can tow. It's very, very powerful. These are some of the fastest cars on the road with the highest power in them. Sure it can tow. Why couldn't it tow? It has 4 wheels, it drives, it can tow.
I think you meant being towed.
Tow. Yeah, okay. It can be towed. Of course it can be towed. Why not? It has wheels, it can just be towed. It can even be charged on the roadside. So if I would run out of electricity, I call like the AA or the VAB or something, they come and charge the car and you get another 20 kilometers. It's exactly the same as a normal car, apart from the fact that there is no maintenance, there is no road tax, there is no CO2, and it's the future.
No road tax.
No road
This is not correct. Yes, of course, you are. It's true.
It's true.
But it's not correct. Why people have to pay a tax if they have a car, but if they have an electrical car, they even receive bonus? Ethically, this is not correct. This is not correct. It's not you. It's the government, because they want to push one technology. This is not the role of government. Government should not push technology.
Can I intervene and say this? We're changing the subject entirely because we've been getting bogged down in electrical cars and in technology and in techniques. Can I ask a simple question to both of our lecturers, and then to have the opinion of the audience as well? Do you believe that the future of urban transport can be privatized, or must it, as I believe, remain something that the state should take responsibility for and eventually, necessarily, subsidize?
It's too expensive to be privatized. It's very expensive. Public transport are extremely expensive. Train in Belgium are catastrophic.
Not compared to Britain.
No, it's very expensive to keep the line, the train, to maintain the train, the personnel, the electricity. It's very expensive. So a private company will not accept because people will not be able to afford to pay for that. You know, if from here to the center of Brussels you pay €1.15, that's nothing. But if you have to pay because it's a private company, it will be €15. That's impossible. So it should remain public.
And it should be subsidized?
It is already. There is no other solution.
Yeah. Okay.
It is usually
That's not the situation.
subsidized.
That's not the situation everywhere.
Say that anything run by the government is extremely inflexible, and public transport here is fairly flexible because it's
not
not
bad.
centrally run. And if you look at the state of buses in the UK, for instance, mostly they're privatised, but it has also meant that they've opened new routes, which is something that's very difficult to do when it's the government sitting on top of it saying, well, you must do this, that and the other. You see, it's much more flexible in private hands. They think, here's an opportunity to make money. These people here don't have a bus route. We'll start one.
Look at what is occurring in transport between cities. I'm Italian, so I can give you the example of Italy. In the past, taking a train in Italy was a disaster. Unclean, delay, expensive. And then the European Commission authorized to have private companies to shuttle by bus. It has been an explosion because it is much more flexible than the train. And this is developing. You see, there are buses from Brussels to everywhere in Europe, and not expensive.
Yes.
But in the center of the city, it's different. There is a mass of people that have to commute to every day, and private company cannot afford to do that. Sadly. Yeah. Because you are right, when the government are controlling is never perfect. But I think that we need to make a distinction between in between cities and inside the cities.
Paul?
Yeah, I don't see it. I don't see the solution space for the problem. If the problem I see is, being saving the planet by actually delivering a substantial saving in the CO2 emitted by the transport sector, by vehicles powered by fossil fuels. I don't see it as a dichotomy between public or private, and that's that. And when I look at the politics in many places, but I do read the British press, and I give up all hope of ever going back to it because it's not the same country. But it's become an ideological thing, and what we need is something that's pragmatic. And if you get people that can work together, and I believe that does not happen at national level, but it can happen at much more local level. I mean, you see both Scotland and Wales coming up with more effective ways of governing and cooperating with the government, with the private sector. But my model there is a true all-sector partnership. It wasn't clear from that, but the city authority would be, if you like, the convener of that group, not necessarily the president or chairman of that group, but it would actually be a kind of the board of a new kind of organization that was going to deliver this mobility service, which is not monolithic. Things like railways must be run by, I believe, the state. I think what we've learnt from the UK is don't try and privatize it. Even the privatizing of buses. And I was at the Transport Research Lab doing studies on the effects of the likely effects of the privatization, the deregulation of the bus services, and the buses in UK now are absolute disaster. Whereas they work here, and I think what I think is missing is all of the generators of mobility. And for example, I don't see why the private organizations, the companies and businesses that have a stake in a railway, a commuter railway, to bring their employees, their customers to and from their factory, premises, offices, whatever. but they never do. Nobody was asking the 25, 30 tenants in our office block to contribute to the management of to the costs of running the services that were bringing their employees into work. And I think if you build it a partnership, you will find that there will be a contribution from also the businesses that are benefiting from whatever the public investment was. But I'm convinced that we're talking an awful lot about problems with.
No, we should be talking about solutions. I agree.
Yeah, I see a space where a solution can be found, and I don't have the time to go into what it would mean for each of us individually to use this universal mobility service. But I'll give you one example. I'm not being anti-car about this. I'm not saying the public transport sector, the UITP, is violently against cars. They think their mission is to it's a competition between public transport and cars, and they're trying to get rid of the cars. Well, the cars are in the way of their buses and trams and whatever, so they have some reason. But I really see that there could be a way of much better organizing the mobility without reducing any single individual's or any single business's actual mobility. I'm not trying to do that. What I think we can do is actually find a way to combine things, and the things that vehicles that carry passengers today could also carry goods, and yet we have totally separate. Everything is atomized, atomistic, and all I'm saying is that until you have that first discussion, actually I have an interest in that. Yeah, I could save some money. I could actually get more customers if we did it this way. So I think a really important element in that, just to give you more idea, would be demand responsive transport, which are small buses that when you have enough of them, can provide something like a 5 to 10 minute response time. It's what a taxi is now. But there was a scheme in Barcelona, the company I worked with, Shuttle, and there's some very successful schemes in the Highlands, but also in some areas around cities, but also within cities. Barcelona is where Shuttle is based, and there's a lot of their services in the county around in Catalonia, basically around Barcelona. And it's a small bus. It could be 6, 10, 12 passengers in it. It would be made a lot more comfortable than the kind of vehicle you imagine. It would be electric, or it would be zero carbon emission. It could be something else if you can come up with something.
So I'm going to stop you there because we're getting a little. Tim, you wanted to come in with a question.
Let me make a couple of points. One thing that Samuel said in his opening address about natural gas cars. Many years ago, when I was a real scientist, I worked for British Gas Research. We were working on high area carbon for absorbing natural gas. So you could have a bullet in your car that was maybe shape forming, much lower pressure, but the same energy density as a high pressure bullet. Now that all the way of all things with privatisations and things. But yeah, I mean you had essentially a low, not a no carbon fuel that you could probably fit into like a fuel tank in a car, and probably get, if things had worked out well, the same sort of range as a petrol vehicle. Probably, but that has gone.
Can I just build on that to clarify your point? Yeah. So is that LNG cars?
No. It's natural gas car.
So LNG,
the gas that you have at home,
liquid natural gas.
But we have a lot of LNG cars on the road. Yeah. Liquid natural gas, is that?
So it's not LPG. No, it's not LPG.
It's LNG.
It's LNG.
LNG.
Well, wait. It's CNG, compressed natural gas for cars, and for truck. It's LNG.
Yeah, but we have that already, right?
Yeah. Yes, but it is not proposed. It's nearly banned.
Yeah. We were working on ANG, absorb natural gas. High area carbons.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's. I think that's pretty much got it. It was a flavour of the month in the US and then in Britain for a little while, and it works. But
You cut immediately your CO2 emission by 40%.
yeah, so it's
Without problem.
Yeah.
With something existing. You don't need a new network. You don't need new gasoline. Very simple.
Mr. Furfari, I assume you are aware that in New Delhi, all buses, taxis, and rickshaws operate on CNG.
Yes, correct.
Studied the feasibility of applying the same solutions to cities in Europe.
Yes, because it's very good for the air, because thermal vehicle produce NOx. And with diesel and so on, normally there is no more sulfur. But NOx is still there, and dust. Gas replaces all that. So it's an immediate solution.
But it needs infrastructure and organization.
Yes, there is an organization in Europe to push that. It was really developing. Let me give you details. When we start to launch that in the European Commission, we launch a project to demonstrate the transport of heavy transport between all the big part of Europe. And for 3 years, a lot of trucks were operating with LNG. And at the end of the project, it was a total successful project, but the Commission decided to stop it. So it's a political decision. Technically, it's there. We don't need anything.
So what about hydrogen? What when you first said about hydrogen, what's it been suggested 100 years ago? Why is hydrogen? I was a teacher, and like 20 years ago in the syllabus, it's like, hydrogen's the next real
it was, yeah, it was a big
disappeared.
Hydrogen do not exist. Hydrogen is not existing. You need to produce it. We produce, for time being, 130 million tons of hydrogen. Hydrogen is a base of the industrial chemistry.
Yeah.
It's the base. Without hydrogen, there is no chemical industry. So it's produced. Of course, it's produced. And to burn that is like, I'm explaining that in the book, to burn that is like to eat your house burning Louis Vuitton and bag. It's ridiculous. You develop a complete chemical industry to produce hydrogen, and then you burn it like a fuel. It's not a fuel. It's a precious molecule. First thing. And
So
second
why-
thing.
So why did the Japanese intend, if the pandemic had not intervened, to have the Olympic Games entirely based on hydrogen-driven transport?
But Paris also.
No, I'm asking the question.
Yeah, but I answer you. Even in Paris, it's already like this. You take a taxi at Gare du Nord, it's hydrogen. With public money, you do what you want. Huh? Is Madame, the Spanish lady, the mayor of Paris, sorry. Madame Hidalgo, sorry. Madame Hidalgo with Air Liquide have decided that the taxi for the Olympic Games in Paris will be hydrogen. You can decide what you want. It's not because they decide that it makes sense.
Germany is building massive hydrogen producing stations near Hamburg, and we are going to do.
Read my book, and then maybe you will change your mind.
We need to have a reasonably effective way of making hydrogen which doesn't involve large amounts of electricity. At the moment, the basic way in which people make hydrogen is to use electrolysis, and this consumes about as much electricity
I show you, Mr. Alden.
But let us remember, as good old-fashioned chemists, H2 plus O2, 2H2 plus O2, does ultimately give you water vapor.
Yes.
So it is, at least in that sense, not producing one of the nasty methane CO2 and other
because hydrogen is not a fuel. It's not existing. You need to produce it, and to produce it with electricity, it requires 7 times more energy than to produce with methane. Breaking down CH4 to produce hydrogen, or breaking down H2O to produce hydrogen, it's 7 times more energy. It's why today, in an open world, nobody produces hydrogen with electricity. It's not existing. Nobody in the world produces hydrogen with electricity.
However, there is something called photosystems, which actually does the process extremely efficiently, taking water and transforming it into 4 protons, 4 electrons, and a molecule of dioxygen. There are plenty of research going on to produce catalysts that would try to do the same thing, and some of them are achieving more than a few cycles. So I think there is still hope out there that we will be able to make hydrogen in a reasonably efficient way, which doesn't require electricity. But it's for the future. But that's another of the topics that we need to discuss in one of our subsequent meetings. Tim?
Probably one of the last things we're going to say, I think, because we're 20 past. In terms of your mobility as a service, one thing that struck me about that round table you had is it includes almost everyone who's currently getting involved in things called hubs for circularity, as in local government, industry, shops, etc., etc. And that's quite a thing. And you could imagine the same conversation going on with the same people.
Yeah.
I mean, from terms of sustainable process industries, there's lots of sectors involved in that, and it's all about the concept of, I mean, certainly quite a few of the chemical industry are looking at, rather than supplying a product, they supply a service. The idea is you're sort of renting the material and you'll give it back to them for recycling. And to a certain extent, that's what we're talking about with mobility, isn't it? It's a transient thing. You use it, it goes back. And certainly in the chemical industry, it's a very interesting concept, this concept of hubs for circularity. We're all going to have to go into the circular economy, blah, blah, blah. And it's got to get organised, and it's got to involve the same people that are sitting around your mobility partnership.
I know the idea is very good. But one very quick, short last question, because we must...
Very different question. I think we have talked very much about technical things.
Yes.
But I think the urban planning is a very important subject for the future. I have lived in Tokyo, and there are millions of people moved around every day within Tokyo, and everybody are moved by electricity, by undergrounds and by trains, etc. Because the towns or cities are densely populated and justify the investment in these public transports. But when you have these spread out suburbs as we have in Europe and United States, it's not economically justified to invest in these systems. And I think that is an interesting subject for the future.
Yes. Quick comment?
Yes, because solution in Yunchuan, the solution is this one that you can believe, that people can believe me. The city control of the traffic in Yunchuan is impressive. And there is no more policemen in the street. Everything is controlled by drones. If there is an accident, an ambulance, all the traffic lights are fixed in order that the ambulance is going straight away. Everything is controlled by new electronic. A huge city where they want to develop more the mobility with cars. So electronic is helping us. It's a fact. It's a reality. So we should not be afraid that we will collapse. The solutions are there. They will be coming from China, maybe, sadly.
It reminds me of the Italian job in Turin.
Yes, very much. I think at this point we should draw a close to the proceedings, and before doing so I want to thank our speakers. also, just to say, we're not going to just rush out. So if you want to finish your drinks, have a little natter and move around and talk to people you haven't been able to talk to, please do so. I want to thank both Paul and Samuel for their contributions, to the audience for your participation. And it's a small token of our esteem. I was going looking for this way up there where I had left it, but my trusty aide here had already gone and got it back down. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much.
There we are.
Thank you.
And we look forward to seeing you all at our next event, whenever that may be.
Thank you.
We'll be keep an eye on the bulletin. We'll be posting something fairly soon.